right. So, let's start.
Go for it.
Yeah. I love how, calm and composed you are. You're better than I am. So I have some...
Yeah, because I'm not the one leading the conversation.
But you're the one that's providing all the meat to this conversation at the same time.
Yes, but I just follow you, so it's easier.
Cool. Well, I think it'll be a dance at the end of it, right? It's like a conversation. But like I was saying, the purpose of this is so that people, whether they're inside the fitness industry or even outside, they could probably learn something from you and your experiences over the years, your wisdom, where you failed, where you've succeeded, and learn some of what's made you so unique and so successful in what you do. So that's what we'll dive into. Might get deep, might not. We'll hit fitness and not fitness, personal. We'll see where we end up.
Go for it.
So I like to start not in a conventional spot. So I wanted to start with a memory that I have of you. Mm-hmm. And when I think of you, the one memory that I have is there was one class that I registered for, and I came in, and it turned out that I was the only one there.
Here?
And, yeah, it was here.
Yeah.
It was one morning. Do you remember it?
No.
Well, I came in, and I found no one was there.
Yes, I do.
And immediately I felt such guilt of
It was the wall ball.
It was the wall ball.
Yeah.
And immediately I think I said to you, I'm like, I bet you were hoping nobody came. And do you remember what you said?
That's boring.
Well,
I'd rather people come because then at least I can do something.
You said I was actually hoping that only one person would come.
Oh.
And in that moment, it changed the whole outlook of my whole workout, my whole outlook of your role. Yeah. You're not just here and hoping nobody comes so it's like a free hour. You want to make a difference. And if you could do that one-to-one, at least you convinced me in that moment, all the better.
Yeah.
So that's a moment.
Well, but it's easier to have impact, right, on one person.
You can see
you could in an hour, you can fundamentally change the way one person does something. You can probably do it too as well. But you probably can't do it for 10 people at one time. So it's a little bit easier. And it was a wall ball. It was a lot of wall balls.
It's a lot of wall balls.
And there was things I wanted to change about how most people were doing wall balls. So I was glad that somebody came in so that I could change the way that they did wall balls. Because I think, was it a Tuesday or a Thursday?
It was one of them.
Because I think it was a Thursday because I think I had 3 classes that day. So I was like, yes, there's going to be like a whole bunch of people going to get to fix the way that we're doing wall balls so that wall balls aren't as terrible anymore. And then I think there was a decent sized first class and it was a decent sized evening class. And then you were the only one at 6:45. I was like, no, I wanted people to come in today to do the wall balls. I was like, oh God, thank God somebody showed up.
Yeah. It's stuck in my memory, even though that was probably like a year ago or so. So I'm curious for you, do you have any of those moments in your life or in your career where someone just made that much of an impact, that moment just really changed the way that you saw something going forward?
You mean like specifically with coaching or fitness or just in general?
Could be anything.
I don't know. I take probably some of my coaching style stuff from different people. I had a high school basketball coach that was a big guy. So small town. I was the tallest guy on the team at 6'1", right? So probably playing against several guys on other teams that are taller than me. And we didn't win a lot of games my junior and senior year, but we had a coach that was 6'2", maybe like 300 pounds. He was a younger guy and somebody that we all got along with pretty well. So he would hop in and play with us sometimes and just completely beat the crap out of us. Just like throw us up and down the court, essentially. Pretty demanding, but also somebody that you really liked. And he really got into people and pushed them, but did it in a way that, at least for those of us that would consider ourselves competitors, was enjoyable. Right? So it wasn't just yelling to yell, it was yelling to get you to be better. So it was kind of figuring out how to motivate people and learning how to motivate people in different ways, right? Like not everybody, some people you can yell at. When I was younger, you could probably yell at me and I would just go into a dark place in a shell and I would outwork everybody, right? Like I would just hole myself essentially, and it was fine because I could run through a brick wall and I'd do it and do it and do it again until I eventually got better and better. But some people aren't like that. Some people immediately hate you. Some people go into a hole and it makes them worse, right? Whereas I had a coach for so that was basketball. I had a coach for baseball when I was around the same age. It was like a traveling team, and his biggest concept was like community, I guess you would call it. So we always traveled together in certain ways. How he paired people up in rooms when we were on the road and stuff like that. And he really didn't do that much coaching, like in-game coaching and stuff. He really didn't do that much practice coaching, partly because we didn't practice a lot. We were constant playing, but just the whole concept of taking kids that you know want to be there and want to work hard and are pretty good, right? Some of them are really good, some of them are pretty good, and just putting them in an environment that got them to push themselves to win games because you already had picked the kids that you knew wanted to win games, right? So like at the time you kind of wonder, all right, he's not really helping us get any better, and because you're living in the bubble in the moment, right? Like he's really only interested in us having fun and enjoying this. But we were super successful. I think we went like 70-9 one year. Wow. During the summer, we won 2 of the bigger tournaments in the East Coast, and we only had 2 guys that played Division I baseball.
Wow.
They both got drafted, so like they were very good. But the rest of us were, Division III, Division II athletes if they did play college baseball, kind of a thing. But what I eventually came to realize was because it was like an invitation tryout kind of team, he had probably picked the kids that he knew wanted to be there, which if you think about it, like transitioning this to like a conversation about CrossFit and coaching, nobody walks in this door that doesn't want to be here, right? Like especially at 5:30 and 6:45 in the morning. So I can make that assumption as a coach. And I think he made that assumption because he put himself in a position to make that assumption. It was also kind of an expensive team, so right off the bat, like if they don't want to be there, their parents aren't going to pay for them to be there, kind of a thing. And then he took that and he created an environment around it, and I think that has been something that pretty much in everything has kind of worn off me. Like I make the assumption that people want to be here. I make the assumption that they want to better themselves, and then you try and find ways to foster that and make it enjoyable. Right, and I've had different coaches along the way, assistant coaches for baseball and basketball, whatever, and they've all kind of had their own personalities, right? And the one thing you tend to learn from these people, because these are probably the people that I spent the majority of my life around, other than parents and brother and stuff like that, is that the ones that were really good at what they were doing were the ones that took their personality and tried to find a way to blend it with the other person's personality, right? So like mine in this circumstance. The coaches that weren't very good were the ones that were trying to be something that they weren't, or that were trying to get you to be something that you weren't as an athlete, as opposed to being a better version of what you were.
Can you give an example?
We had a coach once that had amazing assistant coaches, and every one of them was great, and none of them ever stuck around. And the head coach was not a baseball man. Other sports, other things along the way, and just happened to be a baseball coach for whatever reason. And I don't know if it was young in the coaching career or whatever, but every guy on the team had played baseball since they were little kids, right? So we're talking some of us are like 20 years in to playing baseball. And we're there playing at a time when it's not easy to be there because you have lots of other demands on your time and lots of other responsibilities, so to speak. So everybody's making that commitment. They're not getting paid for it. They're not, we're not getting a scholarship for it, stuff like that. And he's trying to be this big time baseball coach, and he's trying to put on this persona that we all know isn't real, because we've been around baseball coaches our entire lives. And not that he wasn't a good coach or anything along the way, but it created this weird dynamic with the players where everybody was immediately at arm's length, I guess is the PG way of saying it, right? And then it becomes really hard to earn the players' respect, right? So if I came in and I was super rigid in class and super demanding and something along those lines, and you could tell that I was working really hard to be this, and it wasn't natural, I was forcing it, then I don't think people would buy in as smoothly and easily on a day-to-day basis in class, right? Like it needs to be, you know who you are, you at least have a good idea of who the person you're working with is, and then you find a way from there to create a, hopefully in the long run, the end run, a relationship, or at the very least a channel of communication that allows them to push themselves, right? So over the years, I've decided that fitness is a very basic concept, or at least in terms of the classes, a CrossFit gym, really whatever it is, right? As an owner, as a coach, if I can get people to stay safe in class, meaning they aren't hurting themselves, they are capable of continuing to come in day after day. If I can create an environment where they enjoy themselves and they have fun, or they enjoy the people around them, right? Which is a little bit of the coach and a little bit not of the coach, right? Like you have to get a little lucky that there's people there. But you have to also be receptive enough that people want to be around you. So that kind of fosters a community. But if you create the environment that they can enjoy being around each other, then that removes reasons for them not to come in, right? And then it becomes a question of somebody staying safe and healthy. They can keep coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it is. I mean, obviously off days, and if they enjoy coming in, now they have an emotional attachment to coming in. If somebody can consistently keep doing that, it's almost impossible for them not to get fitter, which means it's almost impossible for them not to achieve their goal, depending on how aggressive their goal is, right? So if I'm making I'm creating rules and teaching mechanisms way of thinking of this, I'm removing all the paths of resistance, right? For both them and the concept of fitness and the communication between the two, and then the class environment, right? If we get rid of these barriers or these immobilizations between whatever the two sides are, then it doesn't necessarily become easy, but it removes hurdles and it removes things from the path where they can be more successful or have at least a higher likelihood of success. So, spinning all the way back to the initial question, that's kind of the primary things that I've taken from the people that were sort of in pursuits that I am now, I guess, is that the ones that were better at what they did, coaching, were the ones that kind of understood who they were, understood who you were as an athlete, and then didn't force it, right? Like I kind of always want to use the word manipulation here, even though it isn't really a manipulation, but just you lay out the path, right? And then you work the path with the person or with the group so that they can keep moving forward down the path, as opposed to having barriers or things in their way that you created or saw or didn't see coming, but didn't also help foster get past. If that makes sense.
It's interesting hearing you say this as a coach with over 12,000 hours, with decades of experience, who's one of the best at your craft. You just compare it to some of the other coaches, that you're saying the most important thing is actually not all the mechanics that you know and the mechanisms. It's something more personal.
It's communication, right? Like this business, meaning fitness, meaning CrossFit gyms, where, whatever degree you want to look at it. And I don't want to poo-poo it and say it has very little to do with fitness and training and stuff like that, but it's significantly less than most people think. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems. So if there was like what is your best piece of advice for new gym owners, or whatever you want to call them, it's that the technical science training side of it is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you're in a people business, and that you have to be good with dealing with people and learning how to work with and treat people and building relationships with people. Because you can be phenomenal at the other stuff and still very easily fail if you're an a-hole or you just can't connect with people on a lesser level. I've seen people be terrible at the science side of it, and because they're very good at the people side of it, the business is successful, they are successful. And as I mentioned earlier, like that simplicity of the equation, if people are coming to a workout every day, they're enjoying it and they're coming back and they're challenging themselves, but they're staying healthy, they're going to get fit, right? Just the action of exercise. And within the training realm, a lot of us talk about the difference between training and exercise stipulations. That's irrelevant. If they are exercising every day, or consistently, let's call it,
in a safe way,
and they're in a safe way and they're showing up and they're enjoying themselves, then they're going to keep progressing and getting fitter. There almost isn't a way around that, right? So, and I don't want to make that seem like I don't put any incentive or intelligence into the science side of it, right? Like that is important, but it's not the most important piece for two people, for myself and for you in the circumstance of being the athlete, right? Like I can give you the best workouts ever. I can tell you exactly what to do, exactly how to do it. But if I don't foster a desire or a motivation inside of you to have consistency of doing that, it doesn't matter, because you're not going to do it. Right? Like you see people fail all the time because they can't consistently show up. And for whatever reason, they can't make that connection with, I just need to be here and enjoy myself and make this part of my life. I think a lot of times people are always looking for fitness motivation, right? Like it's probably one of the biggest hashtags on Instagram. It's great, but it doesn't necessarily breed consistency over the long term, right? Like I've always myself looked for different little tasks or chores or motivators, like, competing in the open or competing in the qualifier as a master's athlete or whatever it is, right? Maybe trying to do a triathlon or something. And that gives me short-term motivation to pursue something and try and maintain a greater consistency on a daily basis. But if I didn't love being at the gym and love working out, that all would be irrelevant. So we need to, as coaches or as gym owners or box owners or whatever it is, we need to find a way to create the environment that people genuinely like being in, because then it doesn't matter if they're motivated that day or not, they're going to show up and they're going to be more and more and more successful. And then technically in the long run, you should also, as a coach or as an owner, be more and more and more successful.
Do you feel like most coaches take some of that responsibility on themselves for
the success?
Not the success so much, but the consistency part and helping them want to come back versus just putting it on them and saying, I'll teach you how to do it right. You have to want to come.
Yeah. So in terms of people showing up, in which case, we're basically talking about consistency. You can create and foster an environment. You can build relationships and use that as a motivator, an incentive, whatever it is to get people to come in, to get them to try and get to that consistency you're talking about. In the end, when it comes down to it, in terms of if we're fighting too hard to try and create that consistency and that growth, and this isn't always the case, I guess, for coaches, but specifically for me and where I've been the last couple of years, I'm working with adults. And as adults, we're going to either make the decision to come in or we're not, right, as an athlete. So I can do everything I can possibly do. And a lot of times over the last 12 years or so, that has happened, right? There have obviously been people that, you go out of your way, you do this, you do that, you find really good environments for them to be in, really good class times, you try and remove all the barriers, the hurdles they have. My work schedule is this, well, why don't you come in at this time and we'll find a way to introduce you to these people so you can make friends and all those things. in the end, there will always be, unfortunately, people that create reasons not to do that, right? And maybe the answer is they should be doing something else. Maybe there isn't anything on the planet that's going to be what they want to do, right? Maybe they just don't enjoy the fitness enough. So everybody, in my opinion, kind of has a level of enjoyment for working out that they need to have to be able to maintain it, right? Like, not everybody needs to love it as much as I do to come in on a daily basis. Some people don't even have to love coming to the gym and working out to be able to keep coming in, but they have some attachment to it that gets them to show up, whether that's being around the people that are in class, right? So if you have a core group of friends that you work out with 4 or 5 days a week, you can hate the workouts, but enjoy being around the people enough that they will get you to show up.
Yeah.
In which case, you've fostered that environment somehow. In which case, that person is going to eventually accomplish their fitness goals because their friends are getting them to show up, right? So it's like positive peer pressure, if you will. But you're always going to find that person. Now, maybe you have to dig a little bit deeper and find out what their actual impediments are. Maybe they're terrible at sleeping, thus they're never recovered and rested, and they're always moody. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to be. Maybe they're depressed, right? Like, COVID just happened. We just went through the pandemic. There was people everywhere that were depressed out the wazoo. There are always reasons why. Whether or not you can help somebody through those reasons, though, is not only up to you, but it's meaning me, the coach. It's up to them as the athlete or them as the person that's coming in to train as well. So, you do what you can. You try and follow the process and find different ways and channels of communication that can flow through that process. But at some point, it seems like there's always going to be certain people that just object. And hopefully those people find another realm of fitness, find a different method, whether it's like doing triathlons or, going on bike rides or running, being a marathoner, something along those lines that does that for them. Because not everybody is going to enjoy the same stuff or be able to consistently make the same stuff happen, right? And there's been, I don't know, probably a handful, 5 or 6 people over the course of 12 years that I've probably talked to in class and I know this is going to work for you, but I don't think you enjoy this enough that it's going to make sense. So talk to me about what you actually like doing, kind of a conversation, right? It's like the person
You're not afraid to have that conversation.
What?
You're not afraid to have that conversation.
Well, but I would rather exhaust other means, right? Like, you still want to communicate with the person, because that's also kind of the downside of being the person who works for a living to help people, is that you always want to help people and you never really admit that you don't have the ability to help people. So you're trying to find the ways through it yourself first. And then if you get to the point, you just have to admit to yourself, right? Like, you have to admit to them. You have to get them to admit to themselves. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, that person lost 30 pounds doing Zumba 2 years ago. Go try Zumba again, right? Like, maybe you come back to CrossFit or PT work or whatever, personal training or whatever that kind of training that you're working with them is. Or maybe you don't, but at the very least, like, you come to me and you're paying me or the gym money and asking me to help you. If I'm not helping you and I'm taking your money, then I'm an asshole, essentially, right? Like, helping you might be telling you to do something else. In which case, hopefully you learned something over the course of time that you were paying me the money. But then you're not going to be using it on something that's going to possibly make you more depressed or more upset or more stressed out or beaten down on a daily basis, kind of a thing. So theoretically, no, I'm not scared of the conversation. But I hold it off as long as I can until it's an obvious, kind of scenario.
You can tell, even with such a simple question, the amount of thought that you give.
Yeah, my brain goes everywhere.
To your work. But I think it also just speaks to you're in your element. This is, I don't want to speak for you, but it's like this is your best life, is being in the fitness world.
Yeah.
So I did do a little bit of research here.
Okay.
Right? I have to get a little stalkery. But you didn't start this way.
No,
right?
not even close.
You went to school
almost did.
For marketing, business, right? You were a director of marketing, a marketing consultant, a sales manager, a brand analyst, up until, was it around 2006 or so? Looks like 2009 was your first fitness job. Tell me what was your original plan?
Okay, so my original plan was actually to go to physical therapy school. And being from northeastern Ohio, like the Youngstown area, there was at the time two good programs, Slippery Rock in Pennsylvania and Hiram. And what I probably wanted to do more was play baseball when I got to college, because that's all I ever did was during the spring, during the summer, during the fall, play baseball, and then I would play basketball in the winter. And both of those programs, at least at the time, were essentially a 3-year undergrad and then a 3-year graduate program. So me being a stupid 18-year-old kid was like, oh, I can't play 4 years of baseball. I don't want to go into those programs. I'll find something else to do. So I ended up in Mount Union because there was a couple of guys that I played with, and I knew the school was good for a liberal arts school. And I could play baseball, and it was relatively close. There was a girl I was dating at the time that still lived in my hometown. So, all these dumb reasons you guys hear coming out of my mouth, right? That you're like, oh, he's such a dumb 18-year-old kid. Like, shouldn't have made it on these reasons.
We all are.
Yeah, right? So I went, and I was like, well, what should I do? I'm, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty good at math. I like the idea of business and stuff like that. So I think I probably around somewhere through the first half of my freshman year decided in business. And I ended up with a master's in marketing because I had my first marketing class and it was a blast. It made total sense to me, like the whole human behavior side of it. Seemed like something that would be fun to do because at the same semester I also took my first accounting class and it was just an insane drag. So I was like, okay, well clearly this is the more enjoyable path. So I ended up with a major in marketing, a minor in accounting, a minor in economics, and then I had a bunch of like some socioeconomic classes, like human behavior kind of stuff. And then, ironically, I broke my kneecap in half, tore my labrum off my throwing shoulder. So I only played really 3 years of baseball anyway. So that was kind of a buzzkill. But it was kind of like, oh, there's that karma coming back to get you for your dumb decision making earlier on. Ended up going to grad school mostly because I just didn't really like what I saw from job opportunities after
in the physical
undergrad.
Therapy world?
No. So business at this point.
Got it.
Right. So when I quit playing baseball around spring trip, so March of my senior year. So there's like 3 months left in the school year essentially. And then was kind of forced to focus on what am I going to do next. Didn't really like any ideas in the job. Decided, why not go to grad school? I'm probably going to have an MBA at some point, right? If I'm in this world, based on moving up the ladder and what I'm seeing from the corporate world, marketing, advertising, stuff like that. Maybe it'll give me a leg up. So went to grad school. I was used to working nonstop, so to speak. So like you have your classes in the morning. You go and you work out and you train, you go and you study, you go and you go to practice, you come home and you get your work done, and then you go to bed, right? So I'm going to grad school and I'm making my schedule and I'm like, I really don't want to be here that long. Like this is just kind of buying me time to find a job, but I also want to get this done. So I gave myself ridiculous schedules. I took like 6 classes to 7 classes at a time. At certain points, I was working at the Football Hall of Fame on a free internship because it was giving me credits, but also because it was cool. I was working retail, so like just nonstop stuff. Well, I wish somebody would have told me at the time, it's more enjoyable if you stay in college longer, because I got a year in. I had my fall semester, my spring semester, and then I was on pace to finish that summer in the MBA program. And there were 2 classes left. One was in the second piece, one was in the third piece. And they wouldn't let me take them at the same time because I would have had to miss 1 class of each of them. So upset by that because I could have literally finished an MBA program in 12 months, and that feels like an accomplishment for some silly reason. But I ended up going in the fall, taking other classes. And so my background is business stuff. One of my professors there was a consulting guy. I did a lot of brand consulting stuff. So this is kind of back right around the time when people were really starting to talk about the experience economy, right? Like, what are people, Starbucks, let's say, for example, like you come in, the baristas talk to you in a certain way, they make you feel cool, and they create this whole vibe, right? And this will come back and getting fluctuated into the gym environment. So I started doing that, started working with him, and right around that time, somebody talked me into doing CrossFit, like as an athlete. And I was like, I don't know, this seems like it's kind of douchey, to use a silly word, but like it doesn't make, because it was very local at the time, right? Like people are jumping on boxes in fields to do their competitions. There's nothing really regimented about it. It hasn't really been created all that much yet.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
You just skimmed over how you lived, breathed baseball.
Yeah.
And then you messed up your shoulder.
Yep.
Tore your kneecap.
Yep.
That must have been one of the hardest
absolutely.
times in your life.
Oh, absolutely. But I couldn't, unknown information here. When you tear your labrum, the way I tore it off my shoulder, they had to reattach it in a different spot, right? That's just kind of how they do that surgery sometimes, if it's not enough there to get it back. So you lose the elasticity in your shoulder. You also lose the ability to create and control and slow down your arm and stuff. Basically, I couldn't throw. Before I tore my shoulder, I had a cannon. After I tore my shoulder, I did not have a cannon. So I couldn't really play anymore in the field. I could hit, but it was kind of this whole mindset of I'm the person that's used to playing nonstop and not sitting on the bench for most of the game and then getting like an at-bat. So it just I couldn't find the way emotionally to make it work where I could perform as the hitter and not have to be in the field the rest of the game, right? So it was one of those things where it's like, all right, well, you can stay on the team and you can travel all over the place and then you have no idea what you're going to be doing in 3 months. Or you can quit now, let so ironically, one of the kids that grew up playing with my brother was on the team. And if I quit before spring training or the spring trip, he as a freshman would have gotten my spot, which hopefully allowed him to make progress and eventually start playing more and more and more because I think he deserved it. So it was either I can do this now and I can go and probably play a little bit and yeah, it'll be fun. I'll be in Florida, but honestly, I also have to sit on a bus for 36 hours straight going back and forth. So it kind of sucks. But there's all kinds of reasons for it, but yeah, it was probably a really annoying, terrible decision to have to make. Because at that point, that was the first time that, and I, obviously kept working out because like I said, I've liked being in the gym. I love training, but that was the first time since I was probably 14 when I started working out where I didn't have something to work out for, right? And it was just going to grad school, like I'm in the gym every day, working out, or 5 days, whatever it is a week, but I'm just kind of working out.
That could be we'll get back to the CrossFit part, but that in itself could be soul crushing for some people.
Well, especially when all you do is eat, sleep, and breathe baseball, right? Or whatever your sport is.
So how I see the little bit of a silver lining of like, it's almost like you die so someone else can live right on the team. But how did you cope with that?
Didn't have much time. Had to do something. I mean, I spent 3.5 years of college playing baseball and, like going to class. It's not like I was sleeping in every day and not going into my classes. Like most days going through and almost all my classes. So like I'd done well in college, but when it came to what am I going to do after college, I pretty much didn't care until that point. And then it was like, okay, well, you can keep half-assing what you're doing, in which case the next step is also probably going to be half-assed, or you can suck it up, stop doing what you've been doing every day for the last 22, 18 years of your life and figure out what you're going to do for the next 18 years of your life, or give yourself a shot at least.
So it forced you to mature and
yeah, pretty
grow up.
quickly. Yeah.
Do you ever think what would have happened if you didn't have that happen?
I mean, I probably would have done the same thing, just gone to grad school. I probably would have hated baseball more because I would have stuck around for those 3 months and not really been able to do anything and watched everybody else playing and enjoy themselves.
Yeah. Or I mean, if you never even had the injury.
Oh, I would have played. So that would have been nice.
Do you think you'd be where you're at now?
Coaching, yes, somehow. That's an interesting question because I don't know how much would have changed. Now, if I had stopped playing baseball and ended up with a job that I really wanted to do instead of going to grad school, then I think that would have been impossible to do if I would have kept playing baseball. Maybe I'd be a baseball coach now as opposed to a fitness coach or, a coach inside of a gym or something like that. But yeah, ironically, I don't know if it would have changed that much. Right? So, like maybe my fate was sealed kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Written in stone. I don't know. Yeah.
Not quite the story of the worst thing that happened ended up painting this like much better future. It was like, no, that was gonna.
Well, but it didn't paint a bad future. So, if I had to choose between not being hurt and what could have happened and being hurt, what could have happened, I'm pretty okay with being hurt and what happened.
Because?
Right? I don't know. I mean, like, I could have made different decisions throughout the course of my life and maybe been in a better place. But, like, you don't know if it's a better place unless you're actually in it. So I'm not in a bad place. I'm in a good place. It feels like it's something that you don't look the gift horse in the mouth kind of a thing.
So all of this happened. Fast forward. All of this happens. You're realizing you need to do something different. And then is that when you started shifting away from just business into I want to be a coach, fitness world?
No, not at all.
So where did that happen?
So I finished grad school and I had a really good professor who was a part-time professor because he was a brand analyst / consultant / all this other stuff. So he was the one who started introducing us. I think it was a digital marketing class in grad school at Akron. And he was the one that started introducing us to the concept of like the experience economy, where like people are dictating the experience you have with the brand or the product or whatever, and that shapes the sales process kind of a thing. So he started getting me into that. We started doing a lot of focus groups, using a little bit of my research and market analysis type of background that I had in grad school and undergrad. And basically speaking with people, right? So we would get hired sometimes by ad agencies, sometimes by companies to talk to their customers mostly and figure out what they should do, right? Maybe it was, we have two decisions that we're going to make, this one or that one, and we just need to figure out which one it is. Maybe it's we need to figure out what path we're going to go. We need to figure out if people even want this kind of a thing. But essentially we were creating lines of communication to solve a problem, right? Or figure out what is the best path for them to try and solve the problem. And we were all over the place for focus groups. We were in Denver, Seattle, but the specific one that I'm thinking of, we were in Brookfield, Wisconsin, which is like the middle of nowhere. And it's ironic because my hometown is Brookfield, right? So we're in Brookfield of another state, and we're sitting at a bar after we had done focus groups literally all day. And it's winter and it's freezing. It's like 30 degrees and it's dark, right? Because it's dark in Brookfield, Wisconsin at 5 o'clock. And we're sitting at the bar, and I had started doing CrossFit at this point. So I started in March of 2011. And to me, it was trying to get back into the competitive side of things and like finding a sport where I could push myself and give myself a challenge for, because I hadn't had it since baseball, about 5 years before that. And I'm talking about it, and he's asking me questions about it, and he looks at me and he goes, "You enjoyed that a lot more than you enjoyed doing marketing stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm working out. It's physical stuff. Well, why wouldn't I enjoy it more than my job? Like, duh. Like, that doesn't make any sense." And he looks at me and he goes, "Well, why don't you just do that?" And I'm like, I had not thought about it as a profession, right? Like it was just my hobby, the thing I did for fun, the thing to escape your job and your life and whatever. He's like, have you ever thought about it? I'm like, no, but I'm probably not going to make as good of money as I'm making now. So why would I do that? He's like, well, all right, well, just think about it. It seems like something that might be good for you. So I didn't do anything. I was still living in the Youngstown area. And like a month or two later, I ended up moving to Cleveland because he lived in Cleveland in Beechwood. And it made it easier to get on planes, to have meetings, to, like do stuff in person. So I was up here and I started going to CLE, and they needed more coaches. So I was like, well, I'd be willing to coach. And then the owner at the time was like, all right, well, I'll pay for you to get your level 1 certification if you're willing to like work as a coach to pay it back, kind of a thing. It's like, yeah, that's fine. So I ended up coaching the lunch classes, got my level 1 and all that. And
still not thinking too deeply.
No, like it was part of it, right? And I liked the marketing stuff because I was good at it and because it was a challenge. It wasn't necessarily fun.
Yeah.
And working from home every day, unless you were on site doing something, was starting to become an insane drag where I would and for the people who don't know, like I have a functioning level of ADD that's high functioning. It can be hyper intensive, like in terms of focus, but it's also there. So if I'm sitting there looking at my computer for an hour, I'm going to lose my mind. I need to be moving somehow.
It seems like a theme that you need to be challenged.
Yeah, there needs to be something that's creating intensity somehow. So I eventually just got tired of sitting there working, and I think I got my level 1 in October, started coaching in October, and then by January of the next year, I was coaching full-time, 90 to 100 classes a month, and I think I ended up helping with like one other project at that point, but that was pretty much it. Partly because I didn't want to do the marketing stuff anymore, but partly also because he found a contract where he was like a functioning COO, and that gave him incentive to not really have enough time to do the marketing stuff either. So it just kind of naturally flowed that way, yeah. Yeah, and then pretty much since then, so January of 2012, outside of COVID or after I sold my gym, I've pretty much, or at least until the point I sold my gym at COVID, coached 100 classes a month for all those years, which would explain how I got to almost 12,000 classes, as you alluded to earlier.
12,000 hours, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just constant coaching after coaching, day after day after day.
And it's just interesting that it sounds like it happened by accident. You fell into this passion without really... It was right in front of you without realizing.
I think it was the community that got me to do it, and I don't necessarily mean like the gym with 100 people in it that everybody's trying to get you to be a coach. I mean like I was sitting there on my own all day long staring at my computer doing work, and I needed to be around people more, and going and coaching a class in the middle of the day, or may have been 2 at the time, I can't remember what it was, but I, without spelling it out, knew that I needed that, or I was going to lose my mind. And then they started like interfering with each other, right? Like if I'm coaching, I can't really get some of the work done on certain time frames, and if I'm going and doing groups or something, taking off for a day to do work, then I can't really coach. So then it kind of pushed its way into making a decision a little bit, plus with him getting the other contract and stuff like that. So it naturally sort of happened. But the one thing I don't know is and I wouldn't put this past him, if he took that contract knowing that it would force me to go do this, and that was all part of his plan, which I could absolutely see being the case. Or maybe he would hear this and laugh and say, I'm not that smart.
We'll have to send it to him. Wow. Was there a specific moment, it could be totally insignificant, but was there a moment while you were just doing the coaching here and there that it clicked for you, that it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? This is where I'm...
I mean, it's just fun. Like, I don't know, I guess as a coach, you kind of have those moments, if that is the case. And it's never really not been the case for me, so I'm assuming for some people that might not be the case, if, they might just be doing it as a side gig or hustle or something. But if that is the case, I feel like you kind of get one of those reminder moments regularly, or...
Can you paint me like one of those moments?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you'll have somebody in the classes, and I get exposed to more people than most, being that I worked at 4 gyms the last couple of years. So like, there's way more people that I'm in contact with than just being at one gym.
And somehow, for the record, you didn't get COVID.
I didn't. I never tested positive or felt terrible. So
side note.
I'm gonna knock on the wood loud enough that people can hear us, but I'm sure I've had it of some kind or been exposed to it somehow. It'd be impossible not to. But like, you'll come across somebody every now and then that will like thank you for helping them somehow or listening to them in some way. For example, there's somebody here who I noticed one day, comes in the morning usually, was just really run down and beat up and just like dragging. I'm like, okay, like I sometimes sleep 5 hours a night and I feel like crap the next morning. That makes sense. And then it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again. Then you start wondering, okay, now it's a trend. Now like something's maybe going on. So you start talking to somebody about it. And I found out from him that he had this weird kind of like, some nights I get good sleep, some nights I get really terrible sleep. And there was some correlations, there wasn't some correlations. And the irony of just like knowing people and communicating with people, I had a friend that went and had a sleep apnea test, sleep study done, and it found out that he had sleep apnea. And I feel like opportunities for knowledge and stuff, expertise in life present themselves if you just pay attention. So it's like, okay, well, I know somebody that was talking very much the same way that you are now, that used to work out with me all the time. This is what he did, and it helped a little bit. Maybe this is something you need to pursue. He came up to me like a month ago and said, thank you for listening to me talk about this, because a month later I went and had the sleep test done, and I've been getting like 2 more hours or whatever it was of sleep a night, and his sleep's 100 times better, and now he's feeling better, and he's doing better in the gym and all this stuff. Oh, the conversation started because he came up to me and asked how he could get better, because he didn't feel like he was getting any better. But he wasn't getting better because he was sleeping like crap, and his body was beat up all the time, and he was constantly being run down. So he's always chasing doing 75 pounds on something. He's never progressing, when he could have actually been getting stronger and stronger if he would actually been recovering and sleeping. So then we just kind of talked through it, eventually got to that point. So like stuff like that will pop up. Stuff like, for example, I'm moving to Detroit in 2 days. If that timelines is for everybody. And pretty much every gym I've been at, people have been quote unquote upset. Like, no, you're not going. And, giving you the real emotion, or giving me thank you cards or stuff like that. And that's probably not something everybody gets for their job, I guess. Like, if you leave your accounting firm and go to a different accounting firm, are all your coworkers or your clients sending you thank you cards? Or upset that you're leaving? Maybe not necessarily. So that kind of, I guess, leads into a conversation about like, maybe this was the path to get to because of how fulfilling it is. Maybe it's the one to get to because it presents the most challenges to growth. Or maybe it's the one to get to because it's the most enjoyable, because it's what I would have liked to do if I was the person I'm working with anyway. The hobby path. You would want to work with yourself. Yeah, but like, if I wasn't doing this for a living, I would still be in a gym every day myself. Yeah. Right? Like, I would still be the person that I'm coaching, because I just like being in a gym every day. The gym rat concept from when you're kids, kind of a thing. Yeah. I feel like there's so many rabbit holes we can go into. Yeah, and my brain's going in 19 tangents at a time, and I'm trying to push them all aside to keep answering your questions. I'm already thinking of like a part 2 and a part 3. All right, we have just a couple minutes. Let me just end with some rapid fire, if that's okay. So just whatever comes to mind. Give me a limit to how long I'm allowed to talk when you ask the question, though. Okay, it's like 10 seconds. Yeah. Okay. It's a short. Oh, sorry, this is going to be challenging. But when you think of your coaching career, what's been the biggest growth area for yourself that you've had? Oh, that's
Career
easy,
coaching.
actually. Science.
So
Right? Because, like, I've been in sports my whole life. I've been helping people, teammates, people that are younger than me. I had a younger brother that's 3 years younger than me, so I'm used to having, like, younger athletes around me all the time. That's easy. The communication side of it's easy for me. That's kind of what I'm naturally adept at or drawn to. But I had the business background. So learning the science side of it has been probably the most challenging part, which I kind of did when I was younger just because I was really interested in training myself. So I would learn things so that I could help myself get better. But knowing, which ironically is nice dating a surgeon because she's always talking about muscles and joints and bones that I would have never heard in my life had I not been trying to learn
and
these
you
things.
actually know what
Yeah,
she's saying.
perfect. Yeah, that's how I know where I'm at. If I can understand what they're talking about when they're having conversations, I'm like, all right, well, I'm improving.
Nice.
This is good.
Okay. What are you excited at this point in your career? What are you excited as your growth area that you see that's possible for you from here?
So so I owned the gym for 6 years, and everybody always asked me since selling that, are you going to own a gym again someday? Are you going to own a gym again someday? Well, yes, probably. I'm assuming so. Like, you never really know what you're going to do in the future. By example, the fact that I have business degrees and I'm doing this for a living. But the plan is, yes, to eventually own a gym someday. But what I'm trying to focus on now, mostly because I'm kind of all over the place, and now I'm going to Detroit and stuff like that, is finding skills to learn and master, right? So I feel pretty good about the communication side of stuff. I've been doing much better at the biology side of stuff, the kinesiology side, the science side, is learning a little bit more of the technical stuff. Learning
For
more...
instance?
There are certain groups of muscles that I generally understand, but I don't technically understand. And I don't want to make it seem like I don't know certain things that I do know, but like I understand how hamstrings function, but I don't necessarily... I want to be able to look at somebody moving and try and be able to figure out which head of the bicep is doing the most work right now, right? Which part of their back is functioning correctly or incorrectly just by the angles they're creating and the way things are flowing, the way that the angle of their hip is hinging, right? So one of the strengths I feel like I have is I can see people and understand what they're feeling as they're moving and what they're doing, not just how they're moving, right? I think part of that is I have done so much moving in fitness stuff and hammered away at it trying to teach myself most of it that I understand what's going right and going wrong in any given moment because I've probably felt that way. And I've always been somebody that can learn from others as opposed to being the person that has to do it themselves to learn it. And I've also been somebody that can learn a lot from a little. So I feel like I'm pretty good at identifying things, but, and this is another piece of irony, I almost want to learn more and more and more to start closing that gap between what I'm doing now and what a physical therapist would do. It's like, oh, you made this decision, now you're chasing it for the rest of your life kind of a thing.
Well, I was going to
But
ask,
the technical knowledge.
with someone with, of course, once someone reaches 10,000 hours, they're considered a pro, a master at their craft.
By the way, is absolute crap. Because not that you don't know what you're doing or that you're actually that good, but because the closer you get to 10,000 hours, what's the name of the curve? The bell curve, where it's like you know what you're doing, you're very confident, all of a sudden you don't know what you're doing, and then you start, that gets worse the closer you get to 10,000 hours. You will get to a point, if you care and you're putting in like these, I don't think anybody gets to 10,000 hours without caring and chasing that opportunity, but right around 9 to 10,000 hours, I would say, if I'm kind of estimating my years correctly, is where I was terrified because I really started to learn what I did not know. And while I knew more than most people, the holes that I was seeing were, in my mind, significant. They probably aren't actually significant, but they were big enough that it created fear in me more so than any of those 9,000 hours before that, to try and learn things to close those holes.
The more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly. And I think part of that concept is the fact that the more you know, the bigger pieces you get to, the more significant the information is you get to. So once you get to the point where you realize what you don't know, the information you don't know is fundamentally significant. And that's why it's partly so intimidating. But then you get to a point as well where you see your peers not knowing stuff that you know, but you don't know why it's wrong. You know what I mean? Like it's I think of things on like macro and micro perspectives. Kind
of like the technical.
Yeah,
part
like
of the
we're
hamstring.
getting real tight on the micro perspective for that. But those are the things that like I know 95% of this concept, but the 5% I don't know makes me feel incredibly inferior. Even though 99% of the people next to me have no clue what that 5% even is yet, because they haven't gotten to that point.
So maybe we'll end with this question then.
Okay.
What is it that drives you to always want to be better?
Oh, the same thing that did when I was 5. I don't want to do anything significant in my life, and this is kind of the most significant part of my life, you could argue, right? I don't want to say this. I don't want to do something significant in my life if I'm not going to at least try to be the best at it, right? And it's funny how, for example, I've noticed a lot of managerial programs, let's say, right? So like, you know, the common ones are like enterprise or whatever. A lot of these managerial programs are going after student athletes, right? Because I think part of their focus is the student athlete is competitive and they're going to push themselves. And to me, that's probably one of the fundamental reasons why every kid should at least try sports or try something, because now we have esports and other stuff, that creates competition. Because if you stick with it long enough, you will eventually learn that competition isn't about teaching you how to be better than somebody else. It's about teaching you how to better yourself, right? So we had a coach when I was 16 that said baseball was you against yourself, right? When I'm hitting, yeah, I'm 1-to-1 with the pitcher, but their pitch isn't changing based on how well I'm performing. I'm still seeing the ball the same. The ball's still going to the same place. When I'm standing at third base and somebody hits a ground ball, no matter how good I am, that ground ball is still going to bounce the same exact way, right? The scenarios in life are going to be the same thing regardless of my performance or capability level. My ability to handle them, get through them, or strive past them, right? Like some kind of greater accomplishment from that scenario is simply dependent on how well I can handle that situation, how well I can handle that knowledge, you know, how I've prepared myself and how well I can handle the opportunity that presents itself. So in greatest fear here, the thing that scares me the most and that I think drives my motivation on my competitive side is that tomorrow I won't be better than I am today. A year from now, I won't be better than I am today. So
why is that so scary for you?
It just seems like, I think this is part of like the ADD and the perfectionist in me and the OCD and everything. Like if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And if you're not getting better, and this kind of goes back to baseball every year, basketball every year, if I'm not getting better, somebody else is getting better, and then I'm going to be inferior, right? Like, it's not true necessarily, right? Because again, you're competing against yourself, but that I'm going to outwork everything and everybody from when I was a kid. And I think because I wasn't the most athletic kid, and I had, like, there was always somebody more athletic, there was always somebody bigger, there was always somebody stronger, that kind of instilled in me, I'm going to go into the basement and I'm going to hit off this tee for an hour every day, because eventually I'm going to be better than the person that is beating me. And I don't know, maybe that's not the healthiest thing on the planet, to have like that back and forth between I'm in it to beat myself and I'm in it to beat somebody else, right? Like maybe the I'm in it to beat myself is healthier. But
I'm
it
hearing
motivates me well.
I'm hearing that growth mindset that you don't see a limit to your potential.
I mean, I don't think anybody necessarily has a limit to their potential, as long as they're pursuing something that actually makes sense, right? Like, I'm 38 years old. I'm not going to go drive an F1 car at any point in my life, other than maybe stealing it and driving it around a path or something. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm not making a dumb decision, then I don't really have a limit to the potential, as long as I'm willing to work for it and take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves.
Yeah.
But you need both of those. You have to have the willingness to sacrifice and work for it, and you have to be mentally and emotionally capable of pursuing something once it comes in front of you, which I think is usually the trickier part for people.
Well, and that's something you've characterized throughout your whole life, just this whole story, right?
Hey, thanks. That makes me sound pretty cool.
Well, Adam, we're here at time. I feel like we could easily. I have a bunch of questions we didn't even have time for. Right? We could easily do it a part 2 or even a part 3.
You just got to put a clock that says "Stop talking for this question by this point."
And the stories are great, right? And it all comes back to this ingrained need, or this drive for challenge and growth, and with that it's so contradictory, because there's a lot of high driven growth people, but you also have the people side and the community that's, since you were young, that's stayed with you as such an integral part. So
I feel like everybody has the ability to be great at something. The people that aren't, or don't feel like that's true, have just not figured out what they can be great at. Right? Like, it's once you find the whole "I never work a day in my life if I love what I do" concept, which isn't necessarily true. There's some days that are kind of shitty and I feel like I'm working and I don't want to be working. But once you find that opportunity, everybody is capable of getting to that point if you're willing to make the decisions to try and get there, which are sometimes not the easiest decisions in the world to make. But if that's who you are and that's what you're going to do, then that's what you're going to do.
Mm. Well, Adam, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I feel like we could easily pick up another episode just there with this, more of this advice that you would have. And
well, maybe I'll have learned some more wisdom after being in Detroit for a little while.
All right. We'll do a round 2 for sure. All right, cool. Well, thanks.